Hello, everyone. Today's daf. We're starting Be'ez Hashem, the third parak of Masechta Bava Metzia, daf Lamed Dalet, and we're going to start from the very beginning of the parak. And the parak is called Hamafkid, and you probably may have learned it in sixth grade, if you went to a yeshiva. But here goes. Hamafkid eitzel chavera behema kelim. Mishnah says someone who is deposited next to his friend an animal or kalim to watch, right? He gave an animal a geduvend. He gave an animal or kalim to his friend to watch. V'nignavu oisha avdu, and the guy who was watching it is a shoymechinam, and it got stolen from him, or he lost it. So now, really, he doesn't have to pay, but he has to take a shvuah. He has to swear that it got stolen or lost. So this guy, shomer, is a very frum guy. And he says, I don't want to take a shvuah because it's such a bad thing to swear. So now, Shilem, so he paid. He didn't want to swear. Shari Amru Chachamim, the Shari Amru, because the halacha is, Shoy Mechinim, if you're watching for free, and it got stolen or lost, Nishba, you swear, V'yotze, and then you don't have to pay the owner back. So now the question is, what happens? They found the ganav. Nimtza Ganef. Now, when you find a Ganef, there's an extra payment called kefil, a double. Or sometimes if you stole an animal, he could pay 4 or 5 times as much. So who gets that? Who gets the extra? Certainly the Keren belongs to the Shomer because he paid, assumingly he paid. He paid for the animal. But what about the kefil or the tashlume abba v'chamisha? So the Mishnah says, "Mishalem tashlume kefil v'chumacham b'shalem tashlume abba chamisha." Mishalem mishva kodin etzloi. You pay to the one who was watching the kodin, to the watchman. He gets the benefit of the kefil. Now, because it's almost as if the animal belonged to him or the kalim belonged to him because he paid for it. The question is, who sold it to him? Just because you pay for something doesn't mean it belongs to you. This is an important question. You know, I could tell you, you can have my car and it's yours, but that doesn't mean you acquired it. To acquire something, you have to have a kinyan. You have to buy it. And here the Mishnah says that the pekadim, the kefil, and the bava chamisha belong to the watchman because he paid for it. But how did he pay for it? Just because he paid for it doesn't mean it belongs to him. It wasn't really sold because when he paid for it, the item didn't belong to the owner anymore because it was stolen. So what does it mean that he acquired the kefil and the bava chamisha? This is the major topic of the Gemara. Nishba, but if he swore, let's say he swore and didn't want to pay, Nimtza Ganef, if you find the Ganef, of course, so the Shomer is out of the picture. Who are you going to pay to? Who are you going to pay that? The Baal Pikadin, the Ganef pays to the owner because it was his loss. And the Shomer exempted himself from paying by swearing that it got stolen. So therefore, when we find the Ganef, he pays to the original owner. Says the Gemara. So the Mishnah gave you 2 examples of a shomer chinam watching an item, an animal or a kalim. So why did the Mishnah give you 2 examples of what a shomer chinam is watching? So as the Gemara says, it's a novelty. It teaches you an idea. The Tana Behem, if we just say animal, that the guy was watching, the shomer chinam was watching an animal. So I would have thought behemuhu demakna like kfela mishum de nafesh tichra lui lapuke. Because the animal, it's a big bother to watch an animal. So as a favor for the watchman, what the owner of the animal does and says, listen, in case it's stolen and you pay me, the animal, I'm going to let you keep the kefil. So that's by an animal. We can say that the owner allowed the shomer to keep the kefil. Aval kalim, the loy nafesh t'chayev. Watching kalim is not such a bother. It's not hard to watch kalim. I would think that the owner loy makna like kfela would not give the rights of the kefil to the watchman. So therefore, that's why it says kalim, that even kalim, the rights of kefil belong to the watchman if he pays for it. Obviously, the intana kalim. If we just say kalim, havim in a kalim who the makna like kfela mushum the loy nafesh keflayo, because at the very extreme case, if there is a kefil, it's not a big loss for the owner because what is a kefil? Let's say it's a computer. So double a computer, maybe it's an extra $1,000 he's giving to the watchman. in case they find the ganav. Aval behema, but an animal which is maybe worth $10,000, and it could lead to even something of a $50,000 if the ganav slaughtered it and sold it. So maybe maybe the owner did not give the rights to the kefil and the daled behay to the watchman. Tzricha. That's why the Mishnah had to give you two examples, behema and kelim. Okay, now here comes the bomb question that we're asking. In order for the watchman to get the rights to the kefil or the daled behay, he has to own the animal. But when was it sold to him? It was sold to him after he paid for it, after it was stolen. And so how did he acquire it? And so you're telling me that he acquired it right when he watched it? When he watched it, we didn't know it was going to get stolen. So he didn't acquire it back then. Maskif lo Rami Bachama. Rami Bachama asked the question. A man cannot sell something that didn't occur yet. The fact that in order for a kefil to belong to the watchman, it has to be existing in this world. And it's being sold to the shomer when it's non-existent yet. Even according to Rameir, a person could sell something that's not existent in the world. Rameir has a very unique opinion that a person could say, "You to a woman, I'm gonna betroth you. I'm gonna make you my wife." He's a goy on the condition that I'm going to turn into a ger. So that works according to Rameir. Or you're going to sell the fruits of a palm tree, even though the palm tree did not give forth fruits. Rameir holds that can be done. So Hanimila, that was said, could go in Paris decal, the fruits of a palm tree, David also, it's guaranteed to happen. Every palm tree is going to give forth fruits. So even before it gave off the fruits, the owner of the tree can sell the fruits prior to the existence of the fruits. Over here, that means that the owner of the item is selling the kefil to the watchman. How that's non-existent. Over here, we go to Damadal of Aleph. Ganva. Who told you that this item that the watchman was watching is going to be stolen? It's not a guaranteed thing. Even if you want to say that it could be stolen, who says you're going to find the ganav? And even if you do find the ganav, who says that it's going to lead to a kefil? Dilma moide umi pater. Maybe the ganav will agree that he stole it, and there's not going to be a kefil. So there is no kefil over here. So how did the watchman acquire the rights to the kefil? What do you mean? When he paid for the item after watching it, he said, "You know what? I'll pay for it." That's when he would, after it was stolen. After that, the owner sold him the rights to the kefil. Who says there's no kefil over here? We didn't find the ganav yet, and maybe there's not going to be a kefil. Maybe the ganav is going to be moida, and there would there won't be any kefil. So Amar Rava answered the Mishnah like this. Our Mishnah says when you give an item to a watchman to watch, right when you give it to him, nasa, it becomes ka'oimalai. It's almost as if you told him, when it will be stolen, and you want to pay me, then my cow belongs to you right now. In other words, really, the actual sale occurred when the watchman took possessions of the animal. And it's almost as if the owner said that if you're going to pay for me for this animal, if it gets stolen, and not say, "Oh, it got stolen, I don't have to pay you," so I'm giving you the rights to the kefil because the Bailim likes that arrangement. Why? Because he's guaranteed to get back his para because he's not paying the watchman, but he's giving the right that if the watchman buys it or pays him for it, then he's selling him the para for right this moment. So he's happy with this arrangement because he gets his guaranteed keren. And if it was to be stolen, perhaps he will never find the ganav. So he likes this arrangement with the watchman, and therefore, because of that, the watchman owns the animal basically when he pays for it from the time that he took possession to watch it, and therefore the kefil belongs to and at that time the cow is in existence. The kefil therefore belongs to the watchman because he is the owner retroactively. Maskef lo Rav Zera. So Rav Zera asked the question: if once you pay for it, right, you are now the owner retroactively. If the animal gave birth, right, or you took wool off the animal, that should belong to the watchman, because when he paid for it, retroactively, he owned the animal from the time he took possessions to watch it. Allah Matanya, why did we learn to the Braisa that the shearings and the children of the animal belong to the original owner of the animal? But wait a second, if he paid for it, it should belong to the watchman. Ella Omar Abzer says, you're right. But he really owns the animal, but it's almost as if the owner said, if you're going to pay for me for the animal, you get the animal, but you're not going to have any rights to the shearings of the children of the animal, and that will always remain mine. I'm never selling you that retroactively. My Pascha, why is that so? How do you know? How could you make that assumption? So Gemara says, Stama the Milsa, if you think about it, without getting into anybody's extreme opinions, a person who owns an animal, a person will sell something that doesn't really belong to him, a profit that could come from someplace else, he'll sell that, because he doesn't know if he's going to get the profit. So the owner of the animal sold the kefil because he doesn't know he's going to get the kefil, so he's willing to sell that. But shvacha de magufa, profit from the animal itself, for example, the shearings of the animal or the offspring of the animal, that is from the animal itself. The owner had no intention to sell that. So the way it works in our Mishnah is very simple. When the watchman decides to pay for the animal, not make a shvuah, he owns the animal retroactively from the time that he took possession of the animal, but not the right to have all the shearings of the animal or all the offspring of the animal belong to him. That remains in the possession of the original owner. So, others have the other opinion. Rava says, Nasa a little bit different. That when does the retroactive take place? Not from the time that the owner took possession, that the watchman took possession of the animal, but it's as if he said that a second before it got stolen, that's when I'm selling it to you. So that's when you retroactively own it, not from the very beginning of time, but a second before it gets stolen. If you paid me from that moment, I'm selling you the animal, and therefore the animal it was in existence in the world, and the owner had the right to sell it. It wasn't yet stolen. So my benai, what's the difference if you say retroactively from the time that he took possession, or he owned the animal retroactively from a second before it was stolen? What would be the difference? You won't have the difficulty of Rab Zera anymore, because it's very understood according to the Ikedi Amri that he does not own the offspring and the shearings of the animal, because those came before the animal was stolen. So therefore, according to the Ikedi Amri, it's more understandable why the offspring and shearings do not belong to the watchman. Iname, here's another problem. The kaim of agam. Let's say it was not, the animal was out there in a park a second before it was stolen. Well, it wasn't on the property of the watchman, so he didn't acquire it because it was not in his property at the time that he's supposed to take possession of the animal. In that case, then he may not have owned the animal when he pays for it, and therefore the kefil will belong to the original owner of the cow. Now the Gemara says, Shilim b'lei ratza li shava. The Mishnah says if he paid for it and doesn't want to swear, then he owns the animal. That's what the Mishnah says. So it comes along Rabbi Yochanan and makes a very big chiddush. It doesn't mean he actually paid the money. As soon as he said to the original owner, Hareini mishalim, I want to pay. That's what he said to the original owner, I want to pay. Even if he didn't pay, it's already his animal. The verbal commitment is enough to make it the watchman's animal, and the kefil belongs to him. So the Gemara says, now we learn to the Mishnah, if you actually paid, our Mishnah says if you paid and you don't want to swear, then you own the animal. So from our Mishnah, you can deduce, Shilem in, only if he actually paid the money, it's his animal. Loi Shilem, but if he didn't pay the money, Loi, it doesn't belong to him. So that's not like Rabbi Yochanan said. But if you look at the end of the Mishnah, Nishba v'loi rotza l'sham, if he swears and does not want to pay, the stress of the word is because he didn't want to pay. But if he wanted to pay, if he didn't pay, it would belong to the watchman. So the two implications from the Mishnah. Some from the beginning of the Mishnah implies that you have to pay in order to make the animal yours. And according to the end of the Mishnah, the watchman, even if he desired to pay, that's enough to make the animal his. So you can't really prove from our Mishnah. You can't bring any proof from our Mishnah. However, I'll bring you a proof like Rabbi Yochanan. So he rented a cow and it got stolen. And then he said, I'll pay for it. So he said, Hareini Misham, I will pay for it. And then you found the Ganev, Misham Tashlum Kefil, just you pay the Kefil to the renter. Why? Because the guy committed that he was going to pay for it. So the Gemara continues. Now, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, the commitment that you want to pay for it is enough to make the animal yours. So let's see what type of watchman you are. Amar Papa clarified. If you're a free watchman, if you say that you were negligent, basically you're saying, I was negligent in my watching, and therefore I'm required to pay you. So then, as soon as he said that, then the kefil belongs to the watchman because he's basically saying, I'm guilty. And therefore the kefil at that moment belongs to him. The boya patanafshe begneva, Hashem Mechinam could have easily said, I don't want to pay, and it was stolen from me. But he did not. If he says pishaiti, that's enough of a verbal commitment that the kefil belongs to the shomer. Chinam. Shomer sochar, what about if shomer sochar? Kevin shoma nigneva, if he says it was stolen, so if he says it was stolen, makna like kfela, because a paid watchman actually is required to pay if the item was stolen. So if he says it was stolen, it's basically a way of saying, I'm going to pay. And therefore the kefil belongs to him. The boya patanafshe b'shvura mesa, he could have easily got out of it, shemer sachar. A paid watchman could have easily said, oh, the animal got broken or died by itself, and it wasn't my fault. The fact that he didn't say that, but he admitted that he did something wrong or he's liable for, and therefore he's obligating himself to pay. So the kefil belongs to him. Shoyel, a borrower, a borrower that says, I'm going to pay, even if he says, I'll pay, the kefil never belongs to a borrower. Why? Because a borrower always has to pay. So it's once you lend something, no matter what's going to happen to the animal, the borrower got something for free to use. So then it's all by default he's going to have to pay, and therefore the kefil does not belong to the borrower until he actually pays. But how could a borrower exempt himself from ever paying when he says, "Oh, I don't have the animal anymore"? The only way a borrower can say, "I don't have to pay," is when he says, "I was using it, and as I was using, the animal died." So that's not an excuse because it's not common for an animal to die while you're using it, and therefore, if the shoyel says that, then we won't let him get away with that, and it's unusual. So therefore, automatically, the shoyel is by default going to pay. So the only way he gets the kefil is the shoyel actually pays. But others say, Papa said, shoyel mame. A borrower also has the verbal commitment that will allow him to own the kefil right away. Why? Because if he says I'm going to pay, the kefil belongs to borrower even if he didn't pay. Because the because according to the Ikad Amrei, he could have exempted himself by saying, "Oh, it died while I was working with the animal." The fact that he didn't say that, so he wants to pay. So that verbal commitment obligated him to pay. So the kefil belongs to him. Amalei Rav Zvid said, Abaya disagrees. Shoyel achisham. A borrower, until he actually coughs up the money, the kefil does not belong to him. My timer. What's the reason? So there's another reason. When you lend an animal to somebody, you gain nothing from it. The only one that gains from the animal is the borrower. So therefore, the lender does not have the generosity to give him the kefil also. As long as the shoyel did not pay for that animal, the lender would not want to sell him the rights to the kefil. Tanya Kavasi the Rav Zid said it like that. A person borrowed an animal, and the animal got from his friend, and it got stolen. Bikidim hashoyel v'shilem, and then the shoyel coughed up the money and paid. Then you pay the kefil to the shoyl. But this brisa says only if the shoyl actually paid. So now, if you have a brisa that says a shoyl is only when you actually paid, so lishna kabbalah papa, the first version of papa, it's not a refutation against that because Rapapa, the first language of Rapapa, it required that the shoyl actually pay in order for him to get the kefil. Because there was another version of Rapapa which implied that here's the Ikadi Amri, is that a shoyl nami, Rapapa said, even if he said, I'm going to pay, the kefil belongs to him. And here the Brisa says the only way the kefil belongs to a shoyl is if he actually pays. V'kidim b'shoyl v'shilim. If he actually pays. Amalak Rapapa says that Rapapa will answer you that this Brisa is not a refutation. You think the Brisa is saying that the shoyl actually paid, but not true. Would you say that this Brisa is more clearer than our Mishnah? And our Mishnah says, and our Mishnah says he actually paid, but we say that our Mishnah means that he committed to pay. The Brisa means he committed to pay, but the shoyl didn't actually cough up the money. So the Gemara says, wait a second, but there's an extra word in this brisa. Mi dami. Also, like Ketani Kidem, Hacha Ketani Kidem. In our Mishnah, it doesn't say the word Kidem, he paid. In the brisa, it says Kidem. Kidem means he fronted the money. So the brisa seems to imply that the shoyl paid. Answers the Gemara, my kidem, what does the word kidem in the Brisa means? Didn't he front the money? But kidem v'ama, he fronted the expression to say that he's going to pay, but he really didn't pay. So that's the way our that's the way Rav Papa is going to learn the Brisa, that he didn't actually pay, but it was kidem. He opened his mouth first and said, I'm going to pay. Says the Gemara, how could you learn that shot in the Brisa? It says gabe soicha and it says the word Omar, and the same Brisa says shoyel kidem. It added the word kidem. Shmamina dafke kitari. So the Brisa, if you read the Brisa in its entirety, it seems that the Brisa switched the language by shoyel to use the word kidem. So it must be that the Brisa is trying to say that when a shoyel will only get the kefil if he actually paid. So the Gemara says not so. Just because you have a brisa, an entire brisa, doesn't mean that the brisa, they're one brisa. Are they both one brisa? So, and because if they're one brisa, yes, then you have a question. But maybe they were put together two different brises, and one brisa uses the language Amar, one brisa uses the language Kidem, but they both mean the same thing. Shailina letanoi, the Bei Rab Chia of the Bei Rab Oishia, they asked the rabbis of the students of Rab Chia and Rab Oishia who knew brises. For Amr, and they said Gabay Adodin Tiny. This was one brisa. If it's one brisa, then you have a difficulty against Rab Papa, and the difficulty remains that it must mean that the brisa is saying that the only time a shoyl will get the kefil is only if he actually paid. Now, new questions of the Gemara. Pshita, it's simple. You get the kefil. If the shomer socher said, I'm not paying, and then he says, I'll pay. So then he said, I'm going to pay. He gets the kefil. The shomer socher gets the kefil. The watchman gets the kefil. What happens? Let's say he said, I'm going to pay. The shomer said, I'm going to pay. We go to Amud Beis. Then he switched around and said, I'm not going to pay. What's the din? He said, I'm not paying. But first he said he is paying. Does he get the kefil? I'm reading, we said, he retracted what he said. He really meant to say that he's going to pay, and the kefil belongs to him. But he's pushing, he's saying, I'm not paying because he needs more time to come up with the money. So that maybe the kefil belongs to him. Similar question. The man said, the shomer said, I'm going to pay, umeis, and then died. The Amr Banav, the kid's kid, said, we're not paying, ma'al. Does the kefil belong to the kids? But they said they're not paying. Do we say that the children retracted the words of the father, so therefore they don't get the kefil? They're really standing by their father's words, but they're pushing off what the father said. They're pushing off what the father said because they need to come up with the money too. So therefore, that's another question. Then we asked another question. Let's say the kids paid. They actually paid. Right? They paid they paid the owner of the animal for the money. Matzi amalahu. So, but maybe the owner of the animal could say, "Ki aknik fela, I was only selling the kefil lavuchen the avid le nachi nafshi. I liked your father as a watchman, and he did me favors, so I gave him the kefil. Liditchul loy. Maybe I wouldn't give you the kefil if the kefil comes in. I want it back, despite the fact that you paid for the animal. It doesn't matter. He once you take the money, once the owner of the animal takes the money, the kefil automatically belongs to not only the watchman, but if the watchman dies, it belongs to his kids if they paid for it. Shilim banim libanamai. Let's say the owner of the animal died, and the watchman who's still around paid the kids of the owner of the animal. Matzi amrle. So maybe the kids of the original owner of the animal could say, "Ki avina kefela. When did our father sell the kefela? The avdat le nachem nashi, because you did him a favor." But we never met you. We're just the kids of the deceased person, of the owner of the animal. You never did us a favor. We wouldn't want to sell you the kefil just because you paid for the animal. Maybe it's no different. Let's say both the father, both the owner of the animal and the watchman died, and now the kids of the watchman are paying the owner of the kids of the owner of the animal. Would you say that the kefil now belongs to the kids of the animal, the kids of the watchman, or not? Now here's another question. Shila mechza. Let's say you only paid for half the animal. Do you get? And you said I'm not paying the other half. Do you get half a kefil? Shol shtei paris. Let's say you don't get half the kefil, but shol shtei paris. If you borrow 2 cows, v'shilim achlim, you actually paid for one of the cows. What's the din? Do you get half a kefil? Here it's a little different because you actually pay for a complete cow, or maybe, but you originally borrowed 2 cows, so it's as if you didn't pay anything you didn't pay it. So the kefil belongs to the original owner. Shol min ashutfim v'shilim le'achlim. Let's say you borrowed from partners, so each one owned the half, and you paid the half to one of them. You paid one of the partners his entire amount. So now do you get half the kefil? Or shutfin sheshalo v'shilim echad mehen mayu. Let's say partners borrowed from one person, and one of the partners paid it out, his half, to the owner of the animal. Does he get the half a kefil? Now the 2 more questions. Shoel mini isha. Let's say you borrowed an animal belonging to a woman, v'shilim abala, but you paid the husband. Now the husband owns the rights to the animal, the profits of the animal, but it's the woman that owns the animal. So is that considered like you paid for the animal, but you didn't pay the right person? You should have paid the wife, not the husband. Or maybe since the profits of the animal belong to the husband, it's as if you paid for the animal. What's the din? And the last question is Isha Shashala B'Shilam Bala Mai, a woman that borrowed. She borrowed an animal, but the husband paid. So she didn't pay for the animal. It was her husband who stepped forward and paid for the animal. So does that mean that the kefil now belongs to the woman, but she didn't pay for the animal? It was her husband that did. And all these questions that we started off Pshita, it's about 11 questions. The Gemara answers Teku. We will leave this as an unresolved question. Okay, so this is where we're at. Bez Hashem will continue with Daf Lamed Hey tomorrow.